It's almost the end of an often perilous journey. Many on board this dinghy crossing the Rio Grande are children. 12-year-old Oscar has just stepped on US soil. He made the trip alone from Guatemala. I came here because we didn't have anything to eat. Every night, a steady stream of migrants arrives. Once they're in the United States, they're registered by US Customs and Border Patrol agents. They often end up in crowded shelters. Unaccompanied children remain there until they're reunited with relatives already in the US or until they're placed in homes. In March, around 170,000 migrants of all ages were picked up by Border Patrol agents along the US-Mexico border.
We've seen the number of unaccompanied children start going up since last year, when hurricanes hit Central America, when the COVID-19 pandemic caused extended lockdown, and when more people felt that the only options they had to put their child in a place where they weren't going to starve or struggle or die as a result of violence was to send their children to the United States.
But for some local officials, there's a feeling of frustration.
Immigration policy has been broken for years. I don't blame these people for coming here, but they need to be given a pathway on how to do it right.
There are deep divisions in the US over how to deal with the arrival of these migrants on the southern border. Under President Joe Biden, a pandemic health order means that most adults and families aren't allowed to remain in the US, but the administration has allowed unaccompanied children to enter the United States while their visa applications are processed. But despite the uncertainty, there's a steady stream of people desperate to escape poverty and violence by crossing the Rio Grande.
Well, for more now, I'm joined by Christopher Boian from the UN's refugee agency, the UNHCR. Christopher, it's good to have you on the program. You know, we have not seen numbers of unaccompanied children at the U.S.-Mexican border like this before. March, we saw a record high. How would you say, how is the U.S. handling this situation?
Well, it's true. There are a great deal of people on the move in this region and, frankly, around the world at this time for a lot of different reasons. It's what we would call a mixed flow. And that does include a number of unaccompanied children. We saw unusually high numbers that the U.S. government reported for the month of April. And so that's true. These are people that are moving for a variety of reasons. But my organization, the UN Refugee Agency, is focused primarily, specifically on individuals who are fleeing life-threatening violence and persecution. And it is our view, and it is a view that is enshrined in international and domestic legislation of a number of countries, that any human being that is fleeing violence and life-threatening persecution must be able to access safe ground and asylum procedures without obstruction.
Well, is that how you see then all of these children? I think there was, 19,000 in March? I mean, do they all classify as refugees?
Well, that remains to be determined. I think that, as you mentioned, these are children, and we're talking about children that are unaccompanied, no parents, no family members, by themselves on the move in a foreign land. And that presents, in a sense, a very special case. I have never met a human being who would not acknowledge that a child by himself or herself in a foreign country doesn't require immediate, compassionate care. And so that's what we're seeing happening now. The U.S. government is deploying all kinds of reception capacity that didn't exist before in order to address this situation and find solutions for these children who are by themselves that are compassionate, that are humane, and that are just.
We've been asked by viewers many times since this crisis began, are there parallels anywhere else in the world where you're seeing just waves and waves of unaccompanied children trying to cross a border?
Well, sadly, there are parallels in many parts of the world. In fact, there are places in the world where there are movements, and much larger scale movements than we're seeing in this region, of people, of men, women, fathers, mothers, children, entire families who are literally running for their lives and crossing borders. And sadly, that does include a lot of unaccompanied children who are either separated from their parents, who are sent by their parents, parents who can't make it themselves, who want to give their children a chance at surviving and rebuilding their lives somewhere in safety. So it's a phenomenon that we see in many parts of the world, yes.
What do you make of U.S. President Biden reaching this agreement with Mexico Honduras and Guatemala to put more troops on their borders. Do you think this is what is needed to prevent traffickers and smugglers, taking advantage of people, unaccompanied children, for example?
Well, frankly, I am not an expert on the efficiency of border security deployments in stopping smugglers. What I can tell you is that, as I said before, any human being that is running for his or her life to escape violence and persecution must have access to safe ground and to asylum procedures. Now, unfortunately, what we're seeing in this part of the world and in many parts of the world are people that are in desperate circumstances for, like I said, a variety of reasons, are turning to smugglers and are taking very perilous, dangerous journeys to escape the circumstances that they are in. And so solutions that make it possible for these people to get to safety without having to turn to criminals and smugglers is only something that my organization would support.
And what would you like to see happen tomorrow in an ideal world?
Well, I think we're moving towards an ideal world. I hope that we are. I think one of the things that has been mentioned both in your reporting and in a lot of reporting around the world is the pressing need for all countries now to focus on the underlying drivers, what we call the root causes of this forced displacement, and really begin to address those root causes in a serious way. This means getting all of the people and actors involved. That's governments, that's national governments, that's multilateral institutions, that's the private sector. That's bringing everybody into the room to address these phenomena together in ways that are perfectly manageable and that will result in humane solutions and prospects for people that are currently being forcibly uprooted, prospects for them to stay where they are that will prevent them having to flee from their own homes in the first place.
Christopher Boian with the UNHCR. Christopher, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Very important. Thank you.
Thank you.